Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Haunt of Love and Lies. Episode 18. Chapter 162. Zena's point of view. It's been almost a day since I crossed through the portal with the Dark Circle army and we left Oasis. This was the very first time in many years that I was outside the boundaries of Oasis. I had almost forgotten how beautiful it was out here. I tightened my hold on the horse's reins, speeding past the woodlands and human village. I was approaching the capital. I was almost at North Central. I have been riding for hours without stopping for a second. It wasn't hard to evade the army once we had left Oasis. I had circled back to where we had burst out through from the portal, and for a second, I thought I was lost. Oasis was a place difficult to find. No wonder Vladimir managed to stay off the radar for so long. The magic holding up the boundaries of Oasis made it completely invisible to the outside world and difficult to find. Before leaving Oasis, I spelled the trail of every path I took. It would be greatly needed when I returned with the Council's army. I lifted my gaze to the sky, taking a final glance at the sun as it took shade behind the clouds. It was twilight already and I was losing time. The blood moon was a night away, and I had to find both Leonardo Black and Morgan Reed and stop the attack that was about to befall those from the south taking refuge in North Central. I kicked my horse harder, but I could tell its frail legs were probably a minute from giving up. I rode for an hour or less, before halting my horse instantly. I just entered the capital. I had no idea where the Black Blood Pack or Crescent North Pack was located, so I was forced to make inquiries. I resolved, heading to the Crescent North Pack instead. It was only a short ride away. I continued my journey, riding into the woods. I rode for more minutes, and only stopped when I felt an intense energy around me. Magic! I couldn't help but gawk at the towering majestic trees. Their knotted arms rose ever upward as far as my head could bend. The leaf paradise before me reeked of magic. I grabbed onto my horse's reins as I passed through the trees. But I couldn't go any further as an invisible shield was stopping me. A boundary spell. My lips broke into a smile as I knew I had just reached the Crescent North Pack territory. I tried using my magic to seep through, and surprisingly, it worked. Usually, boundary spells were meant to keep unwanted visitors out, but I guess this was meant to keep out those with evil intent. "Let's go, boy," I patted the head of the horse, kicking it to motion as I rode past the trees. It felt like I had stepped through a portal into another realm. The view was beautiful as I could hear the soulful orchestra of the songbirds, running water meeting rugged rocks, and the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. I rode faster on my horse, taking the path that led to the woods, hoping it'll lead me to the pack house, the castle, or anyone I could get help from. I was approaching a large meadow, and just then I felt the presence that moved faster against the trees, trailing me. Not just one, there were many, and suddenly, I was surrounded by wolves. Some were in their wolf forms while others were in human forms, drawing their swords at me. Very understandable, considering I was a stranger here. From an angle, a young man, seeming to be in charge, came forward. His eyes were gauging me, cautiously. "Who are you?" I pulled my hands up in the air, slowly getting off my horse. "I am not here to stir up trouble. I mean no harm," I said calmly, as my blonde hair danced across my face, carried by the evening breeze. The man's eyes were still on me. That doesn't answer my question. Who are you, and how did you get into our territory? I am called Zena, I started. I was sent here by a friend of yours. I can't say any more than that. But I need to see more. I was interrupted by a sharp outburst. I snapped my head to my left and another man was standing just outside the circle of wolves that surrounded me. His eyes held a glare, and a fit of murderous anger directed at me. Jax, the man from a while ago drawled, but before he could say more, the other man, Jax, growled deathly. Xavier, she's one of them. She belongs to the Dark Circle, Jax hissed, as his eyes shifted from my arm where the black dragon symbol representing the Dark Circle and all it stood for. I took a cautious step back and my heart jumped in my throat as everyone's deathly and murderous gaze shifted back to me. Attack! Xavier yelled, and the wolves growled angrily, charging at me with speed. I started towards my horse, running for my dear life. Before I could get to it, I was attacked by Jax, and his claws got a piece of me. I used my magic, flinging every one of them against the trees, using the opportunity to jump on my horse. Without a second thought, I kept on racing through the woods, hoping to get to someone that would let me speak first before trying to murder me. Just as my luck would have it, I sighted the castle from a distance and I rode towards it with speed. My bleeding state and speed created fear and tension around as people sent fearful glances my way. But thankfully, I was almost at the castle's gate when from nowhere, I was pushed off of my horse by an invisible force and landed harshly against the rugged earth. I groaned at the pain that rushed through my bones. But sharply, my senses alerted me of the danger heading my way. I snapped my gaze up to find a young woman in a red cloak just about to attack me. A witch! Immediately, I was up on my feet, blocking the force thrown at me, redirecting it back at her. She swiftly evaded it. I wasn't here for a fight, but I wasn't going to stand back and watch myself being murdered. I stirred the air around her, swallowing her up in it, and slamming her against the wall. She crashed into it, but it didn't seem to take anything out of her, as she got on the earth, channeling the earth's magic, using me against it. I evaded it, and she attacked me using her fist. I fought back just as hard. Luckily, Vladimir made his prisoners engage in physical training, in which, to say the least, I had the upper hand, or I thought I was, right before someone crashed against me, ripping me away from her. He positioned himself between the young woman and me, his dark eyes inspecting her before darting toward me. I could feel the energy emitting from him. He was a witch, and someone I could actually have a conversation with. I have something important to tell Morgan Lorenzo. She's with the Dark Circle, one of the wolves that had been chasing me sounded, bursting from the woods. Lorenzo's eyes twitched back on me, widening as I was surrounded by wolves again. I could feel his pulse rising and plummeting, fueled by growing anger. He was about to attack me, when a soft voice slid through the tension around, instantly stopping him. "That's enough, Lorenzo," the voice came from the castle gate, and as I shifted my gaze, it fell on a woman. She was dressed in a green long dress, holding a long sword in her right hand. She walked closer to where I was, dragging the sword against the earth. The young woman I had earlier fought with moved closer to the woman, but she held her left hand in the air. "It's all right, Gwen," she said, taking a few more steps toward me, until she was a few feet away, and it was only when I stared into her deep purple eyes, I realized she was blind. "She broke through the boundary spells, and she's a witch working for the Dark Circle, Valerie," Jax muttered, eagerly wanting to cut off my head. The woman's face was turned to me, it was as if she could see me. "That's precisely why she means no harm. The boundaries are spelled to keep those with evil intent out, but she got in." "She's no threat, the woman," Valerie muttered, and I sighed. "How can we be of help to you?" I inhaled, sharply. "Just like I told the warriors, my name is Zena, and I was sent here by friends of yours. I cannot say any more until I see Leonardo Black or Morgan Reed." Valerie's eyebrows creased, and I could see the surprise evident on her face. "It is extremely urgent, and the more time we waste, the more everyone will be in grave danger," I added, quickly. "Xavier! Please, get Morgan here at once," Valerie voiced, urgently. I was taken into the castle grounds, but I preferred I waited outside. It didn't take long before I heard the sounds of horses approaching at great speed. 2 men alighted from their horses and hurried to where we all were waiting right outside the castle doors. My brown eyes took a good look at them as they hurried closer. Instantly, I knew who they were. The one at the right had an impeccable resemblance to my mate while sharing the striking blue irises of Sheila, and the other man, I could tell, was Killian's brother. They were quite similar. "Leonardo, Morgan," I lowered my head gently, catching their curious gaze on me. "And you are?" Leonardo asked. "My name is Zena, Kaiser's mate, and I was sent here by your brothers, both of them," I said as calmly as I could, my brown eyes darting between their shocked gazes. Leonardo's point of view: "My name is Zena, Kaiser's mate, and I was sent here by your brothers, both of them," the woman sounded carefully, her brown eyes shifting from me to Morgan as my blue eyes narrowed on her. "What?" I heard several gasps from Xavier, Jax, and a few warriors that surrounded her. I couldn't hide the shock and confusion swirling in my depths. I took a step closer, my blue eyes taking in everything about this witch. I also noticed the symbol of the dark circle on her arm, and there was a small pyramid symbol on her wrist. Morgan moved closer to her with his gaze raw with emotions. "What are you saying?" He was struggling to keep his emotions together, and frankly, so was I. Zena's gaze traveled around, before meeting Morgan's again. "I am saying I was sent here by my mate, Kaiser Black, and his friend, Killian Reed." She paused. "Your brother," she added, her words shocking us completely. "My brother is," Morgan started, vibrating with an unidentified emotion. "Alive, together with Kaiser," Zena sounded again. "This could be a trap. She's with the enemy that killed the Alpha. We watched him die right before our eyes." Jax shouted, vibrating with a rage that had grown within him since the night of the attack, "and Killian was killed." It was like everyone shared similar rage. But it was understandable. The pack had lost many lives from the attack, including Nate, one of Killian's warriors. I didn't know him at all, but he was a close friend of Jax and Xavier. "Killian is not dead. He survived, and he and Kai are stuck in Oasis as prisoners," Zena rushed quickly. I urge you to believe me. Any more time we waste put all three of them, including everyone in North Central, in danger. She could be lying, Xavier started, as Valerie stepped closer. I am not, she spoke confidently, pulling a hand into her dress, and slowly, she pulled out something, tossing it to me. I caught it immediately. My eyes rounded at the small object. It was the Black's family crest. Kaiser always had it with him. My blue eyes went back to her. He gave me that to give to you. And Killian told me you'll believe me as well. It's understandable for you all to doubt me, but we don't have time. The more we drag this on, many innocent lives within and outside the fortress are in danger, including your brothers and Sheila's. Do you know where Sheila is? Lorenzo asked quickly, and she nodded. I believe you. My blue eyes pierced hers and I meant it, I believed every word she said. And for the first time in many weeks, I had hope of finding my siblings. I do too. But we should take this inside, Valerie suggested, holding onto her long sword. I was forced to pull my eyes on her. And as usual, the biting pain that always stabbed my chest returned. Like I had said, everyone lost something the night they attacked the pack, including Valerie. She was the very reason things hadn't been worse. Right after she lifted the veil restricting the witch's magic that night, she had sent a call to almost everyone that the White Wolf was in danger. It was an old Crystal Fortress way of alarming everyone of great danger. I had managed to arrive just in time before Killian was killed, but the council and its army couldn't make it on time. Valerie anchored a powerful spell in the witch's cemetery that wiped off many of the Dark Circle armies, and in the process, her magic consumed her and she lost her sight. The witch tried to heal her eyes but her sight couldn't be restored. We should, Morgan's voice shook me out of my thoughts. I nodded and he led us through the castle doors, and into the office with Valerie, Gwen, Xavier, Alan, Lorenzo, and Jax trailing behind us. Once we were in the office, we settled in and shut the door while I preferred to stand, leaning against the wall. Killian, Morgan said. I saw my brother die, his eyes never pulled away from Zena and all our attention was on her. Please, tell me what exactly happened. What is Oasis? Alan asked from behind and the room became quiet. Zena's brown eyes went around everyone in the room before she began talking. Oasis is Vladimir's prison world, she started, and we all listened. The more she kept on talking, I couldn't keep still. I started pacing around with the new information we were receiving. I pinched the skin on my forehead. Killian was alive. That was a relief. Oh, I never knew a day like this would come when I would be relieved in hearing my worst enemy, Killian Reed, escaped death. Oh, goddess, how things had changed so much. I focused my attention back on Zena, hanging on to her every word. She had saved Kaiser's life and taken both of our brothers in. Sheila had saved Killian's life the same way she saved the lives of the warriors that died around the meadow. And my poor sister was forced to remain at Vladimir's side. At every word that escaped Zena's lips, I felt my anger slowly rising. She shared more insight on Oasis. No wonder we could never find them. That place was almost non-existent with the magic holding up the boundaries. Zena also apprised us of the Dark Circle's plans to attack the location where those from the southern regions were at. We have to tell the council, came Morgan's voice, but Zena shook her head. No. That is precisely why I came here first. Sheila informed us that there's a traitor within the council working for Vladimir. What? Valerie bit out in shock at Zena's words. It's true. She saw him when he attended one of the Dark Circle meetings in Oasis, Zena added. Who is he? I asked, impatiently. I always knew it. I knew someone who had to be working within the council had to be working for the Dark Circle. It's Felix, she spoke clearly, and almost everyone in the room gasped in shock. I remained silent and frozen, and was anything but calm, processing this piece of information as I leaned against the wall. Felix was the traitor. I felt anger mixed with my blood. He was the one all along. He has been ratting us all out and was the reason the Dark Circle learned of Sheila's identity 14 years ago, and that attack led to the death of our parents. I shut my eyes closed, trying to keep my wolf in control, as all he wanted was to have our claws deep within that traitor's heart. And I swear to the goddess, I will. There's still more. Zena calmed the rage and outburst in the room with her soft voice as she informed us about the blood moon and Vladimir's plans for it. I exchanged glances with Morgan. This was exactly what Zarya was talking about in the meeting. Thankfully, we had a chance to change Amelie's vision of the future. So, what's the plan now? Lorenzo spoke gently from the corner he had quietly been sitting. I could see the rage in everyone's gaze, and they were as impatient as I was to find Killian, Kaiser, and Sheila. But first, we have to take care of Felix's situation and stop the attack on the south. Zena shared with us every detail of tonight's attack on the south, and after we came up with a plan, one that doesn't involve the council, and doesn't give that traitor an inkling of what we know. We assembled warriors from both my pack and Morgan's. Our army would be waiting for the Dark Circle army at the location of the attack, and the south would be informed about it. While Valerie, Zena, and I would inform the council of what's going on, after which, I would personally deal with Felix. Morgan had agreed to join the attack on Vladimir's army tonight, taking along Alan, Gwen, Xavier, and some witches from Valerie's coven and those at mine. It was already dark outside when we were done planning. Morgan had already left with the others for the attack, while Valerie, Lorenzo, Zena, and I prepared to leave for the council's castle. I moved slowly in the darkness to where Zena was, saddling her horse while feeding him some hay for the ride. She tilted her head in my direction as she felt my presence, and her sparkling brown eyes fell on me. Zens, I called her name. I am sincerely sorry to be meeting you under these circumstances, and for that as well, I pointed out to the wound on her shoulder. It's nothing really, she replied, calmly. Also, thank you for helping all of them, I said sincerely. If it wasn't for Zena, only the heavens would tell what would have been of my brother and Killian. She smiled softly, nodding, and a small smile found my lips as well. You don't need to thank me, Alpha, she said, and her words made me frown. It's Leonardo to you, and welcome to the family, I voiced, smiling. Her eyes widened, and her face softened, making me smile. I liked her already, and frankly, she was perfect for my brother. Leonardo's point of view. We were gathered in the council's castle, along with Zarya, a few of her witches, the elder wolves, and a few members of the council when Felix rushed through the doors at great speed. I came back here as fast as I could, he said sharply, his feline eyes darting around. What happened now? Your words sounded extremely urgent and disturbing. Yes, Felix. This is important as well as urgent. Please, take a seat. Elder Philip moved his hand in the air, pointing at one of the vacant seats. What is this all about? He moved closer to the round table. And what about the others? We cannot wait for them. This is important, Zena spoke, and just then, I pulled up from my seat, moved to the tall doors, and shut them closed. What happened? He asked cautiously, moving his eyes from me back to the elder wolves. We have been information about Vladimir's operations, and his possible location, Oasis, Elder Zeke sounded. What? Felix shuffled in his seat. How did you get this information? From someone on the inside, Damien voiced, shifting his gaze to Zena who was leaning against the pillar. Felix followed his gaze, and his eyebrows furrowed as if just noticing her presence. Who is she? He asked quickly. She has been in Oasis, and was sent to warn us, Fendrick, the leader of the Fays, said. Warn us? Felix almost gasped, his dark eyes shot back at Zena. Yes. The Dark Circle has deployed its army to North Central, to attack the southern camps in the capital, Elder Alex uttered, and Felix was silent for a second. No. This is impossible. Only the Council knew the location of those camps. There's no way the Dark Circle could know, he spoke slowly. Precisely, our thoughts. It appears that we have a traitor in our midst, feeding the Dark Circle this information, Elder Philip said. That's absurd. No one would dare betray the Council. This woman, Felix pointed a finger at Zena, she's telling a lie. How sure are we that this isn't one of the Dark Circle's plans? Sending her here to spread false lies, and distract us. He was up from his seat. The blood moon is tonight. We have no time to be listening to such nonsense. Enough! Zena yelled, banging her hands on the table, as the air around became a little rough, charging with her magic. Enough with the lies. We all are aware of your true nature and where your loyalty lies. We know you are the traitor, Felix. No. No, he began, scanning the faces of everyone in the court. This woman is telling lies. He stopped abruptly, taking a step back. His eyes darkened with a stormy rage. I see, this was a trap. So, it's true, came Elder Walter's voice as he stood from his seat. You are one of them. Yes, and you have no idea what is about to come. The blood moon is tonight, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it, and by the magic of the White Wolf herself, Vladimir will win this war, Felix muttered slowly with a grin, enjoying every word that escaped his lips. An uncomfortable silence stalked the court for an impenetrable second. I pulled away from the door, moving closer to where the imbecile was. You wanted his confession, and there, you've heard it. He is of no use to us, and trust me, he's better off dead. At least one less problem to worry about. I pulled up the sleeves of my shirt, and moved closer to Felix. I agree with Leonardo. We should kill him, and be over with this. We can't afford him getting word out to the Dark Circle or they'll know we are coming, Zena suggested, and everyone in the council seemed to have nothing against the idea. Felix directed his blazing gaze at Zena, who stared at him unconcernedly. He hissed like a serpent, sticking out his claws, and instantly aimed for Zena. Before he could take a step, Lorenzo placed himself before Zena, muttering a chant. Felix fell on his knees, writhing in pain. Blood escaped from his eyes and nose. I walked closer, sticking my claws out, and swiftly, I pierced my claws into his heart, feeling the life pounding against his chest in my grasp, and with great satisfaction, I ripped his heart out. I tossed the organ on the floor, watching Felix slump dead with his blood soaking him in. All right, since that's over now, let's move on to more important matters, Zena sounded, quickly. Tonight, is the blood moon. We must get to the White Wolf and prepare for the war that's almost upon us. I took a deep breath. Just the words I was waiting to hear. And I couldn't wait. Kaiser's point of view. I held my hand in the air, gesturing to the small group of prisoners that snuck behind me. Instantly, they all spread out, covering the perimeter as a few of us ventured into the underground cave where the army's armory was located. I readjusted the cloth covering my face, looking straight ahead to Killian. The more we moved into the cave, I could already feel the lurking presence and subtle disturbing sounds made by the constant dragging and stamping of their heavy boots against the ground. We moved closer, as silent as possible, but it was only a matter of time before they sensed our invasion. But that was exactly what we wanted. We kept moving, and stopping suddenly, when the noises from deep within the cave ceased, and almost as if on cue, the burning torches inside the shadows died. It was time. My hazel gaze twinked between the ragged piece concealed, shifting gently to Killian way up ahead. I nodded gently to him, as the rest of us backed against the darkness. Subtle movements belonging to the warriors stationed at the armory hastened in the cave, and soon, we could see their shadows move past the rocky walls. Intruders! One of the warriors yelled, utterly irritated and vexed, gaining the attention of the other warriors inside the cave who rushed to join him. Show yourselves! His voice echoed throughout the cave walls, and as soon as it died, the protruding sound of bones snapping, twisting, and reforming echoed louder in the cave. A sick smile lightened my face. The next thing we heard was a loud thundering growl that rippled throughout the cave, causing cracks on the walls, and then the satisfying cries of terror that tore from those imbeciles' lips as Killian in his gargantuan pitch-black wolf tore them into shreds. It took only a full minute until the chaos died down and I pulled out from the shadows, lighting a torch just in time to see Killian shift from his wolf into his human form. My eyes scanned the blood splattered everywhere in the cave and the remains of what seemed to be those imbeciles. I sent a euphoric glance at Killian now in some clothing. Not a bad partner, I said almost with a grin, earning a lip-tight smile from him. Enough of the flattery, he cleared his throat, stifling a chuckle. We must hurry, he gestured at the group that came with us. And everyone moved to work, pulling open the armory doors. Take as much as you can, I sounded as Killian came to me. It's almost time, he said with his amber eyes full of worry. The Council's army need to be here, otherwise, one of us, you, Sheila, me, these prisoners will be in grave danger. They will be here, I muttered, pulling a hand on his shoulder. I had enormous trust in Zena, and I knew for a fact that they would come. We are ending everything tonight, and this place and everything it stands for will be up in flames. So, loosen up, tough guy, you look like a grouch. I slammed his chest playfully, moving into the armory to help the group. We gathered as many weapons that would go around for everyone and we left the cave, stepping into the darkness. My hazel deep eyes lifted to the dark sky. I could already feel the enormous power of the moon that had begun to blow in. Even though I didn't practice, my mother's blood ran through my veins, and I could feel the power of the blood moon. I kept staring at the sky, and it didn't take a second before the outline of the glowing red moon appeared in all its glory and power, consuming my gaze. And I felt it. The great power that rushed through my veins, setting me free. I couldn't fight the surge of power shooting within me, forcing me against the earth. And for the first time in this hellhole, I felt complete. I felt Cade. He was back. My glowing orbs pulled up to Killian. "It's time," Killian said, heaving a sigh, and I nodded. "Find Sheila and the witches. I will take care of the rest," I said, and Killian nodded. "Good luck." I moved past him, taking the route the prisoners used when I heard Killian's call in the darkness. I swerved around and my hazel eyes connected with his. "Just be careful," he said, and I just couldn't hide the silly smile that forced itself out. "You too, buddy," I replied, and with one final gaze, I shifted into my wolf. For the first time in this hellhole, I felt my wolf, Cade. From this second, our time had begun ticking. And deep down, I knew for a fact, nothing would go wrong. Sheila's point of view: I was right outside the cave, feeling the cool satisfying breeze of the night as I watched the witches trooping into the cave, all dressed in the ceremonial red cloak of the Dark Circle. I was wearing one as well. It was almost time for the ritual as I could already feel the power of the blood moon. It was almost upon us and I hoped Kaiser and Killian were doing great. And Zena too, I hoped she had succeeded in getting to Leo and Morgan. Ever since she had left Oasis with the army, we didn't know how things had gone, and so far, the Dark Circle hasn't received a word from the army. I peered once more at the dark, starless sky, and right before my eyes the blood moon appeared, and I felt its great magic. It was time. I made my way into the cave. Every second of the last 8 weeks had brought me to this moment, and I couldn't wait for this night to be over. I inhaled, feeling a shiver ripple down my spine. I moved through the rough rocky path, going deeper into the cave when abruptly, I was pulled into a corner and pinned against the wall. I gasped at the sparks that shot through my body and my blue crystals fell into Killian's magnetic amber pair. I felt a rush of relief as my hands tightened around his torso, and he pulled me into his embrace with his lips on mine. "Killian, what are you?" His lips covered mine. "I had to see you, or I swear, I would have gone crazy." I kissed him back, briefly. "How are things outside?" "Good. Kai is taking care of it and I hope the Council's army arrive just in time," he said. "They will," I pecked his lips, before forcing myself out of his grip. "I need to go now," I stopped him, and I watched as fear and worry rose within him, unwilling to let me go. I could feel Killian's growing uneasiness as his crystal amber eyes locked with mine, and I held my breath as I felt our souls connect. And deep down, I didn't want to leave either. "Please, kiss him again," I heard Adie's voice in my head, and before I could take action on her words, Killian's mouth invaded mine once more and our tongues entangled in a deep embrace, his arms squeezing me so close to his body that I could barely breathe. Killian pulled away reluctantly, resting his forehead on mine. "Please come back to me, safe and unharmed." There was something in his words that made my soul tighten. I don't know what, but I nodded. "I swear I will," I smiled. "Always," I assured him gently. "I will be here with the witches. I know you can handle yourself, but please, at the first sight of danger, Sheila, just call my name and I swear I'll be there," he said with all seriousness that I couldn't help but smile at him. "I will," I muttered, kissing him one last time before leaving him and joining the trail of the witches to where the ritual will be performed. I walked in, behind the coven's witches, taking a careful scan around. Everything had been carefully prepared. My eyes went over the ancient marking that seemed like they were deeply etched on the ground, moving to the phoenix stones positioned around the crystalline water. I sighed again. I had asked Jaskier about the vessel that Nikolai had chosen for tonight, but he had no idea who it was. It worried me that I didn't know what that imbecile plans, but it doesn't matter. I jerked from my thoughts, feeling a strong grip around my waist, and then Vladimir's scent invaded my nostrils. I turned to him, smiling, and from behind, Nikolai joined us. "It's time already," he said, and I nodded at his words. My eyes moved from him to Nikolai. "Are you going to be watching the ritual?" I asked Vlad through my eyelashes. "No," he replied, and I nodded, hiding my relief. "I am going to be tonight's vessel." The second his words reached my ears, I felt my spine stiffen and my eyes gazed at him expressionlessly before shifting to Nikolai. "That's dangerous, Vlad," I said calmly, bringing my eyes back to Vladimir. "I don't agree with this new change. We should use a different vessel first, just in case things go wrong." "Nothing will go wrong tonight," Nikolai assured me from behind, as my blue eyes slowly fell on him. I felt an overpowering urge to rip his throat out. But I had to tame my raw emotions, not responding to his comments, and my gaze drifted back to Vladimir. "If this is truly what you want," I said, and Vladimir's lips pressed to mine. "Don't worry, darling. I know for a fact that this will be successful." I nodded, having nothing more to say on the matter. They had decided on this. My eyes met with Nikolai. "We should begin." At my words, the coven witch spread out, taking their positions on each ancient symbol etched on the ground. Vladimir took off his leather garment, exposing his broad arms, and chiseled chest where the symbol of the black dragon was inked on his skin. I followed him to the crystalline waters, and slowly, he settled in. His wet golden hair stuck to his face, and his eyes found mine. Nikolai moved to his position at the end of the water and slowly moved to mine at the head of the water, right opposite Nikolai. The instant I stepped on the ancient symbols, the phoenix stones glowed brightly, and I felt its magic mix with the air, charging into the crystalline waters. I took a deep breath, knowing at this moment Jaskier and the witches were gathered as well somewhere within the cave, waiting for the time they will join the ritual, changing its course of direction, and instead of making use of the crack and temporary unleashing the dark magic in Vladimir, we will be permanently sealing the crack that has been made by Nikolai in the prison caging this darkness. I closed my eyes, as Killian's face flashed through my mind, calming me. It gave me the strength I needed to do this. Just the thought of getting our lives back to normal where no threat or darkness was lurking around was so tempting and the motivation I needed. I pulled my eyes open, and they captured Vladimir's fathomless stare on me, regarding me so deeply. "Let's begin," I released my magic, and my eyes glowed a bright blue, causing the ancient symbols and inscriptions on the ground to glow as well. I began channeling every witch in here but concentrated more on Nikolai's magical energy. I had to weaken him to a point where it'll be easy for Zena and the witches to pull down the invisible boundary spells holding Oasis. Just then, the ritual had begun, and there was no turning back now. Kaiser's point of view, we were all in position. Many prisoners were scattered throughout Oasis, watching and waiting for the signal before we began the attack. I was in my wolf form, sharing control with Cade, constantly searching the air and sky for the signal, which was Zena's and the witch's successful entry into Oasis. It was until we saw the signal that the attack had to begin. My eyes lifted to the raging blood moon. I was worried. Sheila must have begun the ritual now, and the attack should be happening right now as the witches are busy with the ritual. I couldn't help my trembling. And somewhere deep down within my soul, I recognized the fear settling in, not for the attack, but for Sheila. Ugh! I groaned internally. This was all Killian's fault. I knew my sister was very capable, I had seen it countless times, but for an unknown, sickening reason, I felt fear. "Oh, Goddess, please take care of her." I moved around the woods, to clear out my thoughts and expel the fear settling in. The exercise worked a great deal. My eyes went back up, scanning for any signs, but nothing. "Please, give me something," I begged mentally. "Come on, love," I muttered internally, and immediately, I felt an enormous wave of magical energy pass through me, sweeping through Oasis. It was external and supreme. My eyes darted up into the darkness and I noticed blue sparks traveling in the air. The boundary. A smile found my lips. The boundary was collapsing. They were here. I couldn't hide my elation as another wave of powerful magical energy swept through the air and earth, almost pushing me over. It lasted for a quarter second before it stopped, and I felt it. The fresh breeze of freedom. Cade lifted his face in the night, releasing a deep long howl for everyone to hear, informing them it was time to fight like our lives depended on it because, at this point, it actually did. Sheila's point of view, the witch's chants echoed within the walls of the cave, as we carried on with the ritual. I could feel the power of the 4 phoenix stones mixing with the water. It was time to move on to the next phase of the ritual. Nikolai nodded to one of the witches from his coven, and he stepped forward, bringing the dagger specifically for the ritual to me. I took it from him, holding its black handle. I started chanting in a foreign language, and the magical symbols on the dagger began to glow. I strode to the crystalline waters that shone with the magic of the phoenix stones. Vladimir was still in it, his deep golden eyes narrowed on me as I brought the sharp blade to his throat. I hesitated briefly, as his unreadable gaze burned into mine. For the next phase of the ritual, the chosen vessel had to be dead while we perform the resurgent ritual. The vessel's throat had to be slit with the black dagger, with the blood mixing into the crystalline waters now holding the magic of the phoenix stones. With a small glint in his eyes, Vladimir's lips curled into a smirk, as he moved his head into a small knot, and I pressed the sharp blade of the dagger deeper into his neck, slitting his throat. His blood jumped right out from his body, rushing out at great speed. Vladimir sank himself into the water, which had begun to color red. His golden eyes never left mine until he closed his eyes. The black dagger was no mere dagger. Its magic was enough to stop one's heart for a few minutes, and that would give us enough time to complete the ritual. I turned my eyes to Nikolai, who was watching me from the end of the water. I nodded to him, and the witches began chanting, and so did I. We had barely gotten deep into the ritual when a force of magical energy swept through us. And every one of us felt it. Nikolai's dark eyes widened, and I was sure he knew what it meant. The boundary had collapsed, and at this moment, Oasis was under attack. And the best part, we were right in the middle of the ritual. I shook my head. "Don't leave your positions," I warned firmly. I could see the tumult in Nikolai's eyes, but even though he wasn't stupid, he knew leaving the ritual would not only ruin whatever chance we had of unleashing the dark magic, it would endanger us all. His dark eyes left mine, and darted towards the entrance of the cave where a few witches were guarding, nodding at them. At once, they left their positions. My eyes narrowed on Vladimir's unconscious body in the pool of his blood. The ritual continued. It was almost at its peak. If I had to do something, it was now. I concentrated deeply, channeling from the coven's magic. I connected with Jaskier and the witches, and we deviated from the original spell Nikolai had created for the ritual. I moved quickly. I knew it was only a matter of time before Nikolai realized something was wrong. Before that happened, I had to ensure I was almost done sealing the rift in the prison binding Shota's magic. The spell I had created and was now anchoring was too powerful. I kept channeling Nikolai and the Coven Witch's magic together with Jaskier and the witch aiding me, but it wasn't enough. I needed all the magic I could get. I had no choice but to channel the magic from the Phoenix Stones. I felt enormous magic coursing through my veins, breathing fire. It was consuming me and taking everything I had, but I was almost there. I could feel Shota's magic. Its darkness seeped through the crack, which I had begun to seal when Nikolai's raging voice plunged the corner walls of my mind with his magic. "Traitor! I knew you shouldn't be trusted," I heard him say as he broke free from my hold and I lost control of his magic and the rest of the Coven Witches who now surrounded us. With everything that was going on, I tried my best not to break off the connection I had with Jaskier and the witches, and also with the new spell I had already begun. I was this close to ending it all once and for all. "You won't win tonight," he sneered, and I easily understood what was about to happen. Before the witches surrounding me could lift a finger, I sent a force against them that sent them flying against the rough walls, and immediately, I created a shield covering Nikolai, Vladimir, and me. My blue eyes shone on Nikolai, who attacked me fiercely with his magic without moving from his position. I evaded his attacks swiftly, lunging back at him until I was able to knock him unconscious. But I knew it wouldn't be for too long. Vladimir was any second from awakening, and I couldn't harm Nikolai yet. I needed as much magic as I could get from channeling him. I continued the spell in a haste, rushing as fast as I could. I was almost there when I felt a sharp piercing deep in my bones. I pulled my eyes open, and they fell into Nikolai's dark gaze, before moving to the black dagger that had stuck deeply to my stomach. It wasn't a deep wound, but I could feel my strength giving up as my blood dripped into the crimson pool of Vladimir's blood that held magic from the Phoenix Stones. Nikolai began chanting, channeling the power of the Phoenix Stones, and one by one, they began to lose their brilliant blue and white glow, turning a deep red. I groaned, pulling the black dagger out of me. Even as Adi roved to the surface, my wound was still not healing. The pool of blood containing Vladimir's body began to boil rigorously out of control and the water turned a dark color, and I continued chanting. Before Nikolai could proceed any further, there was an enormous force that broke out from the water, blasting everything in its path, and tearing down the shield that had covered us. Killian's point of view: the attack on Oasis had begun a few hours ago when we felt the boundary collapse. Everyone could feel it, including Nikolai, as he sent some of his witches to find out exactly what was happening. But I was waiting for them within the cave, along with some prisoners, to ensure no one left the cave alive, and I wished that included Vladimir, but it didn't. He cannot be harmed. The only option we had after Oasis had burned to the ground was to take Vladimir back to North Central as a prisoner while we find a way to end him permanently. I was sure the council had a solution for that. It didn't take long before Vladimir's witches' bodies were scattered around the cave. I left the prisoners guarding the entrance of the cave and the narrow paths and joined Jaskier and the witches who were also in the cave. By the time I reached there, they had already begun the ritual, connecting to Sheila. I was at a near distance watching them when all of a sudden, I noticed something was wrong. The ancient symbols they were standing on began to lose their glow. I felt my heart mount an instant race, and immediately, I left them, hurrying to where Sheila was anchoring the ritual. To my horror, the witches were trying to use their magic to tear down a white shield. I couldn't find Sheila, Vladimir, and Nikolai. Sheila. Something had no doubt gone wrong, and it scared me. Sheila was in there with those imbeciles. Immediately, without thinking, I leapt in the air, giving Riker full control as he attacked the witches, and right on cue, the group of prisoners guarding the entrance of the cave joined in, fighting the witches. Riker moved quickly and viciously like a wild beast, ripping off the heads of the witches with his sharp canines as we made our way to the shield. My first and only thought was to get to my mate. Riker raced to the shield, and the instant we touched it, a strong force sent us flying against the rocky walls, with pain coursing through our body, that I was forced to shift back abruptly into my human form. What? I steadied myself to stand, and amid the fight going on, my attention was focused on the white shield. I couldn't see anything that was going on inside, but something was wrong and the white shield was turning black. A fearful beat drummed in my ears, as my entire body felt the fear settle in. I rushed closer to the shield, about to find a way through it when something within exploded, tearing down the shield, and as soon as my eyes found Sheila, I grabbed her just in time before the powerful force sent everyone flying in different directions, and the earth to shake heavily, and causing rocks to roll down the cave, falling mercilessly on anyone in its path. The cave was crumbling down. I held Sheila tightly, using my huge body to shield hers from the destruction. After painful minutes, it died. I groaned, pushing off the rocks that had fallen on me. Sheila, I turned my eyes on her, pulling her into my arms, trying to get her awake, but I couldn't. Sheila's body was as cold as ice. Killian's point of view: for a second, my body was completely paralyzed. I couldn't stop the wild drumming of my heart in my ears as I carried Sheila's cold body in my arms and left the place, moving out to the narrow path of the cave. Sheila was completely stiff and her body cold. My rounded, fearful eyes fell on the part of her stomach that was covered with blood. She had been wounded, but the wound was not so deep. Why wasn't she healing? I cleared the rocks that lay around, carefully placing her on the ground, my large hands cupping her cheeks as I tried everything to get her awake. The more I failed, I could feel myself a second away from going nuts. Panic and frenzy knotted my chest, and Riker's insane clawing and growling were worsening the situation. I just couldn't think straight. Sheila, please, come on, I tried again, but nothing. And it was at that fearful moment, I realized something. I couldn't hear her heartbeat. I lost whatever control I had been holding on to and could do nothing to stop the trembling of my hands and body. Oh goddess, please, I whispered to myself, as I kept on applying pressure on her chest. Still, nothing. 80, please, I tried to connect with her wolf, but I couldn't. I growled in frustration, fighting the stinging of my eyes, and the defeated emotions strolling in. I pressed harder on her chest, sharing partial control with Riker, praying to the goddess that she pulled through. I couldn't imagine my life without Sheila, she had to pull through. I kept on pressing hard, and right before my eyes, Sheila gasped awake, breaking into a weak, unsteady cough. Her pulse was weak as well. I held her body in my arms, brushing back the locks of her hair, as her eyelashes kept flapping weakly against each other, unable to stay open. I pulled her against a corner wall in a seating position. Kill, she held my hand, weakly. Vlad, Nikolai, she breathed weakly again. Get them. I will, but first, I have to get you out of here, Sheila, I began, but she held my hand tightly. Find the Phoenix Stones. Killian, please. I locked my gaze briefly with her, before reluctantly nodding. Please, Sheila, just stay awake. I'll be right back, I left after she nodded, heading back to where they were holding the ritual. The place was in complete ruins, with dust choking the air, making it difficult to see anything. I didn't have to use my wolf's insight before finding Nikolai. His heartbeat was blasting the place. I moved closer, and my amber eyes fell on him. He was scouring through the ruins, searching for something. As I moved closer to him from behind, I felt his body stiffen. I clenched my jaw, moving swiftly with my wolf's speed. I attacked him before he had the chance to mutter anything or even lift a muscle. He crashed against a pile of rocks, losing hold of the Phoenix Stones in his hands. I descended again on him, diving my claws deep into his flesh, tearing it. I kept on with this, sending a slow but lethal pain to his entire being, giving him no chance of recovery. He was bleeding profusely as I held him by the throat, forcing his weak, unsteady gaze on me. I wanted to ensure I was the last person he saw, right before I ripped his heart out. Nikolai's dark eyes on me widened and I could tell exactly what was going on in his head, but I didn't have time to indulge. I still had one more imbecile to find. Unapologetically, my claws plunged into his chest, ripping his heart out. I watched Nikolai take his final breath from the cavity that now appeared in his chest. Like the worthless scum he was, I tossed his lifeless body to the pile of rocks and disaster laying on the ground. I searched through the bodies on the ground, but there was no sign of Vladimir. He wasn't here. That was a problem. Killian, I swerved around and saw Sheila at the entrance. She looked better than I had left her, and most of her wounds had begun to heal. Vladimir? She asked, and I shook my head, picking up the phoenix stones. He isn't here. He has escaped. I sauntered to her, and didn't miss the emotion that stalked her gaze. Unease. That's not good, she finally muttered, and I nodded. Let's get out of here, I gripped her, scooping her into my arms as her hands wrapped around my neck and made our way out of the cave, only to step out to find Oasis completely conquered. I stopped moving as a few shadows hurried toward us. I placed Sheila down as I recognized them. They were faces I hadn't seen in a long time. Leo. Sheila called into the fading darkness in shock as she hurried into Leonardo's arms. I was smiling from ear to ear as Alan, Lorenzo, and Jax rushed to me at great speed. I embraced everyone, pulling away as they went over to Sheila. My amber eyes shifted to Leonardo, as he sauntered to me. His blue eyes held mine, and I couldn't stop the smile that found my lips. It's good to have you back, he voiced, as we embraced each other. I pulled away, glancing around, and Morgan? I asked, and before Jax could reply, I heard Morgan's broken voice. My head snapped left, and my gaze took in Morgan as he hastened his steps to us. Brother, I chuckled, moving to him, and pulled him in for a hug, and his arms sprawled around me tightly. I could feel the water rushing from his eyes. Oh, Killian, Morgan's green eyes were glassy with tears. I nodded, knowing exactly what he had to say. His entire emotions were imprinted in his eyes. It's good to see you too, I said sincerely, as Morgan's eyes moved past me, falling on Sheila who was wide with smiles. He pulled her in for a hug, and she held him tightly. I've missed you, she whispered, holding him tightly. I missed you more, I heard him whisper back, before pulling away. What about Vladimir? Leonardo asked, and I shook my head. He escaped. What? Lorenzo spoke sharply, his eyes moving to Sheila's. And Shota's magic. My eyes darted back to Sheila. I had been so frightened earlier that I had forgotten to ask. She trailed, and for a second, her gaze seemed like she was remembering something. Nothing. The darkness is gone. It never found a vessel. I exhaled in relief, pulling her into my arms. And the others? I asked. At the camps, tying up loose ends, but we must leave at once, the witches are about to turn this place to dust, Morgan said, and without hesitating, we joined the others at the camps. Many prisoners had already left, and only a few remained along with the council's army, and a few warriors from my pack and Leonardo's pack. We found Kai with the council's army, and the instant he saw us coming, he rushed to us. I am glad you both are all right, he embraced Sheila. What about Jaskier and the witches that were? Sheila began, but he stopped her, smiling. They are all right, and they left with Zena and the prisoners not long ago, Kaiser muttered, turning to Lorenzo and the witches that came along. I guess we are done here. You all should leave. We will burn this place to the ground, Lorenzo muttered, and everyone left the walls of Oasis, leaving the witches to their work. From a distance, we heard the loud crumbling of Oasis and everything it stood for. It didn't take long before Lorenzo and the witches joined us. We went to the horses waiting for us all outside. I helped Sheila up on her horse and was about to get on behind her when I heard the sound of a horse approaching us at great speed. My eyes narrowed, and I was able to catch the face in the early hours of dawn. It was Gwen. She hurried to us on her horse, and came to a halt when she was close enough. She lowered her head to us. "Gwen!" Lorenzo called with surprise. It was obvious she hadn't come with the army for the attack. So, what was she doing here? "What are you doing here?" came Morgan's voice. "I was sent by the council." "It's very urgent," she rushed quickly. "What happened?" Leonardo asked in a deep cold voice, and I felt a shiver run down my spine at the words that were eager to be free from her lips. "It's Amelie." She had another vision, Gwen spoke slowly, swallowing a lump. "Something bad has happened." My hold on the horse's reins firmed and my gaze fell on Sheila as I felt her body stiffen in my arms, and once again as cold as ice. "Sheila's point of view," I moaned internally at the endless sparks that journeyed deep in my bones, breathing both warmth and life into my soul. I flung my head to my left, feeling Killian's toned and muscular arms around me, forcing an ear-to-ear smile on my lips. The soothing beat of Killian's heart and his wet skin against mine calmed me. I opened my eyes gently and I found Killian's amber irises watching me. I chuckled. "Have you been watching me sleep?" I asked with a cheeky grin, wiping my lashes with the back of my hand, while Killian helped tuck loose strands of my brown curls behind my ears. I had no choice. I couldn't risk closing my eyes, only to realize having you here beside me was just a dream, he replied in the softest voice that made 80 purr at the back of my mind. I smiled as my eyes naughtily ran over Killian's body. He just came out from showering with a white woolen towel. He was tempting and my body yearned for him immediately. His curls trickled droplets of water onto his shoulders. Killian leaned forward to me. He kissed me slowly. "How long have I been asleep?" I asked, gazing at the windows, seeing as the daylight had faded into night. "A few hours," Killian tossed the woolen towel to the floor, and climbed onto the bed. I used the opportunity to straddle him. "And you've been watching me that whole time?" I asked with a laugh. "Don't blame me, love, how are you feeling?" He asked me with searching eyes. "Perfect," I said. And frankly, I felt all good and amped up. The sleep had really done some good and made me feel rested, and the strange tiredness I had felt earlier was long gone. It has only been hours since we returned home, leaving behind everything that had happened these last 9 weeks behind as it crumbled down with Oasis. I felt free, and surprisingly, more powerful than ever. "What time is the council's meeting tomorrow?" I asked Killian. "At the first light of dawn," he replied. I had tried my hardest not to think about the message the council had sent through Gwen since we returned. But last night, during the blood moon, Amelie had 2 disturbing visions. One was of an all-out war, which every one of us knew had to do with Vladimir's escape, and that was expected. Knowing Vladimir too well, he would want revenge for what happened back at Oasis, especially on me. I had tried my best to sever whatever connection I had with Vladimir and have also gotten rid of his mark on me. And as long as he was still walking free, he wouldn't stop trying until he destroyed the council and everyone in North Central. What worried me more was Amelie's other vision. The council refused to say anything about it, and instead, had requested an urgent meeting today, but Killian had kicked against it, and insisted it was left for tomorrow. I just couldn't feel at ease. Killian wrapped his large arms around me, jerking me out of my thoughts. He reached out to stroke the outline of my face with his large hand, and I nestled into it, kissing his palm. Don't think about it, Sheila. Forget everything about the council and Amelie's visions for now. We will find out tomorrow. In the meantime, let's just remain like this, together, Killian whispered against my lips, before capturing my lips in his and wrapping one arm around my hair. Our tongues entangled together and so many emotions flowed between us. I poured all my love into our kiss, feeling every unspoken word. My hips started to grind on top of his, as I felt Killian growing rock hard. I swallowed his groans, increasing my speed, rubbing myself against his erection, and I swear I could have exploded right there. But Killian was in a far much worse state. His breathing was rough and erratic. A smile found my lips. I could feel myself coming closer, but I didn't want this blissfulness to end. When I looked into his eyes, I was shocked to see his desireful gaze glowing golden. He was sharing control with Riker. I allowed Adi to share control with me as well, just as Killian was doing with Riker, so four of us could share in this experience. Our movements became more vigorous and possessive from their influence. I was so high on adrenaline. We both bit into each other's necks at the same time, sending an indescribable pleasure coursing through our bodies as we made our release. Slowly, we climbed down from our delirious state. Killian released me and bite Mark to help me heal faster. I did the same, and he ran his fingers on my newly formed mark. You are completely mine now. And so are you, Killian Reed, I kissed him, nestling into his arms that felt like home. I love you, Sheila, he muttered drowsily, just before I felt the weight of his arms relax and I knew he had fallen asleep. It was the earliest hours of dawn already. I was already dressed up, and ready to leave for the council's meeting. Morgan, Killian, and Lorenzo were waiting outside with the horses while I decided to go fetch Valerie. I didn't get to see much of her yesterday when we returned. Frankly, I didn't get to see much of anyone from the strange exhaustion I felt. I walked through the familiar path to Valerie's spell room, and the ever-tall wooden door creaked open the second I reached for it. I walked into the room and it felt as though I had returned after so many years. But everything still looked the same. My wandering eyes stopped moving when I felt her presence from behind. I swerved around, and my eyes glistened the instant they met the foggy purple eyes of Valerie standing at the door with her lips pressed in a smile, looking straight at me as though she could see me. I hurried to embrace her firmly. I pulled away after a while, and my eyes inspected the dark lines around the skin of her eyes. I couldn't stop the tears that slid past the corner of my eye. "Oh, Valerie," I said, still unable to believe that she was blind. The ritual she had anchored on the night of the attack had taken a lot from her. Before I could say another word, Valerie stopped me with her angelic smile never faltering. "Shhh, don't say anything at all. It's not as bad as it seems, she smiled, perks of being a witch. Even though these don't function anymore, there are a whole lot of things I can see and feel through my magic, she muttered, holding my hands in hers so tightly. I am sorry for everything that happened, Sheila. I creased my eyebrows, shaking my head as careless waters kept escaping my eyes. It's nobody's fault. I know, she said, inhaling. But you don't deserve any of these. I couldn't say a word and simply leaned into her embrace. After a while of talking, we joined Killian, Morgan, and Lorenzo outside and left for the council meeting. I was on the edge throughout the whole ride there. I didn't know why exactly. Maybe it was because this was the first time I would be attending the council meeting as a member. Everyone began to settle into their seats as the elder wolves came in. And now we were all seated in the council's grand court. The place was heavily crowded with members from different magical kinds. I was seated beside Killian, and Morgan was on the other side with my brothers. I couldn't help but smile at the view. I never thought the day when I would see Killian, Morgan, and my brothers on the same page would ever come. It was really nice. My attention was pulled to the doors which opened gently, and two women strode in. I knew instantly that the one on the left was Zena and the other was Amelie. My blue eyes kept following them, and as if feeling my stare, Amelie stopped walking, turning her eyes to meet mine. I inhaled deeply, holding her stare, unable to look away even if I wanted to. Slowly, Zena helped her into her seat, quietly nodding to me. I will cut to the chase. Something bad happened and it's extremely serious, she started, but the court remained quiet. What is this about? Leonardo asked, and Zena's gaze scanned around briefly. It's about the Shota's magic, she muttered, gaining everyone's attention, including mine, and I couldn't shake off the cold feeling that crept in. Sheila's point of view, it's about the Shota's magic, Zena said, her dark gaze traveling the faces of everyone in the court. What happened? I leaned forward against the giant table, my deep gaze moving from Amelie, whose eyes were now focused on the black crystal ball in her slender fingers. She looked as though her mind was lost somewhere in it. Last night during the blood moon, Amelie had two visions. One was of an all-out war and the other was about Shota's magic. Zena paused, her dark gaze found mine. It's free. Several gasps broke out, and I was left completely speechless for a second. That's not possible, I muttered more to myself, clutching my hands together. I do know that. We were told Vladimir had fled after the attack, and the Shota's magic was imprisoned back in its cage by you. But the visions are never clear, but they never lie as well. Something must have happened or gone wrong during the ritual. But that darkness found a vessel last night, she said calmly, pausing for a second as if giving me time to process everything she said. But everything she said just didn't make sense. Nothing could have gone wrong because I wrote the spell myself. Tell us everything that happened last night, she said again calmly, settling on her seat, right beside Amelie. I pulled my eyes closed, thinking deeply about everything that happened that night. The ritual was going just fine, and then I began the spell, but Nikolai realized it. Coven witches had tried to attack me, and so did Nikolai, but I was almost finished closing the crack within its prison walls. And then, I paused, trying to remember everything in detail, but I couldn't. It was as if there was a glitch in my memory. I shook my head. The next thing I remembered is sealing the crack, and there was some kind of magic explosion from the phoenix stones. I added exactly how I remembered. This is terrible, one of the council members said. Now how do we know if this darkness is truly free or not? Everyone's eyes returned to Zariah and Amelie, who still hadn't said a word, and her eyes were still trapped on her black crystal ball. I watched the woman for a second, sighing deeply. Zariah was right about one thing. Visions are not always clear, but they never lie. If truly something had happened during the ritual, I would have known through my dreams. But I haven't had any since the blood moon. It's impossible to know for sure. Zariah shuffled in her seat. This dark magic is like nothing we've ever encountered before. It's been in existence at the dawn of magic itself until Shota found a way to channel its dark powers. She was the very first witch who harbored this magic until the old council found a way to stop her, Zariah explained, and I listened to the familiar words. I learned about the witch in one of Nikolai's journals. Shota was one of the most powerful witches of her time, but she was dark and wanted more power. She harbored this dark magic for many centuries, spreading its darkness around our realm. The ancient council tried many times, but there was nothing that could stop her. That was when the ancient council decided to imprison this magic forever. That was the only way. They anchored a blood ritual, sacrificing the lives of many supernatural kinds to create a magic, powerful enough that could trap the Shota's magic. It was some kind of prison, and it worked. That was why Vladimir wanted this war more than anything. He needed a blood ritual to fully unleash what had been imprisoned. Even if truly the Shota's magic has found a vessel, we could still stop it. Without recreating the blood ritual, it will never be fully free, so before that, we must stop it, an elder wolf voiced. And Vladimir? How are we sure it isn't in him? One of the council members said. It could be Vladimir or someone else. We can never be too sure. This darkness is tricky and cunning at the same time. We have to find it before it fuses with the soul of its vessel. And how do we know who is harboring the magic now? Damien, the demon overlord, questioned, and drifted again to Zariah. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, Zariah said. There's a way we can find out. It's a long, tiring process. But it'll work. I leaned forward with my clasped hands under my chin, eager to hear what Zariah had to say. Slowly, she started explaining her ideas. It had to do with some ritual, and my eyes rounded when she made mention of Shota's remains. Zariah nodded, and before anyone could ask anything, she voiced. Shota's soul had already been fused with this dark magic that when the ancient council had imprisoned Shota's magic, she died in the process. And her bones were in the council's possession throughout the centuries. With this, we could find out the new vessel for this magic, and we would need your help, Sheila. Whatever you need, I said, sincerely wanting to help in any way I could. And what happens after? Killian asked from beside me. We stop them at all costs. It would be much easier now because once this magic is completely free, it will be the death of us all, Elder Noah muttered coldly. But I couldn't blame him. I had seen what doom lay ahead for us all if Shota's magic was truly free. I had fallen into some deep thoughts as the meeting progressed, talking about Amelie's vision of the coming war. but I couldn't give them my undivided attention. Something was bothering me with everything I heard today, but I didn't know what it was. It was only as I felt Killian's hands on mine, I shook out of my thoughts into the chaos around me. It was Amelie, and she was being led away by some witches. It seems like she was having one of her visions, and the black crystal ball in her hand had a pale glow in it as well as her eyes. We can't stop it. No one can. It's too late, she kept mumbling until she faded out of sight, and I was greeted with a pounding ache against my skull and growing exhaustion. Sheila, Killian brought my attention to him, squeezing my hand warmly. What's wrong? I don't feel well, Killian. I would leave first, I said, and before Killian insisted he came along with me, Valerie decided she would leave with me. I left the council's castle with Valerie, after bidding my brothers goodbye. We were riding side by side on our horses back to the pack when Valerie broke the silence between us. All right, tell me. What are you thinking about? She asked, keeping her face up ahead the route we had taken. Amelie's visions, I paused. The Shota's magic, I added as Valerie listened quietly without uttering a word. I don't know why, but I feel on the edge. You do not trust the certainty of Amelie's visions? She asked. No, I replied sharply. It wasn't that. It was precisely the opposite. I sighed, looking her way. If truly Shota's magic roams free, it means I failed to keep that darkness from ever finding a vessel. And I'm responsible for that. What if Vladimir's the vessel? You have no idea how dangerous that is. I've seen what will happen if Shota's magic is ultimately set free. Everyone is going to die, Val, if again we fail to stop it. She stopped walking, turning to me. What do you mean you've seen it? I do have dreams, Val. It started when Vladimir took me. It took me a while before I realized they were visions. Chaos, war, and deaths, I explained honestly. You have the gift of foresight, like Amelie. She moved closer. Tell me of what you've seen since the blood moon. Nothing, I came again. Absolutely nothing, I replied weakly, feeling the painstaking ache against my skull. I haven't had them since the blood moon. That's unlikely. I know, I said, nodding. The more reason I need to help Zarya find out if this magic is truly free, and who exactly is harboring it. I agree. And I swear, I will help as well, but I do agree with Killian too. You need good rest, Sheila. I may not be able to see, but I can feel it. You are exhausted, Sheila. She took my hand. Holy Goddess, Sheila, your body is so cold. All right, I whispered more to myself, as we approached the warrior waiting for us with the horses. I also do agree, I needed some rest too. These past few days were taking a toll on me, and now more than ever, I needed to be at my full capacity to help the council find out the vessel harboring Shota's magic. Hopefully, this time we will be able to stop it. Sheila's point of view. I was covered with sweat and breathing heavily by the time I was done training with the young warriors who were in their first year of shifting. We had begun training every young male and female so they would be able to protect themselves if the time ever came. Every pack, coven, and kingdom in North Central and those that survived from other regions had begun extensive training for the war that was almost upon us. We had no idea when Vladimir was going to strike, but his silence so far only meant one thing. He was rebuilding his army, and we had to be ready. I walked through the castle doors and hurried quickly to the kitchen to get some water. Ria was there as well, having her meal in her training clothes, and she was also part of the training. My eyes scanned around, and there was no sign of Brielle. "Where's Brielle?" I asked, settling on the seat next to Ria. A short smile found Ria's lips. "Somewhere around, I guess. Probably venting her frustration out or sulking," she said, stifling a laugh. I couldn't help but smile. Brielle has been in the worst mood since a few days ago when Killian changed the duties of some of the warriors and reassigned them to other tasks. Unfortunately, Brielle was one of them. She was taken off the field and assigned to castle, and would most likely not join the war. That didn't sit well with the female beta, but Killian did it for her and Alan, especially for their pup that was almost on its way. Brielle was already 10 weeks gone, and since Wolf's pregnancy was far different from that of humans, she had 3 more weeks left. I took one more sip from my water before jumping down from my seat. It was almost noon, and I had to be at the council's castle. I left Ria to finish up her meal and sauntered to Killian and my chamber. As soon as I entered, I stripped and showered quickly. It's been almost a week since Zena, Valerie, and a few witches left North Central to retrieve the ancient witch, Shota's bones for the ritual, and as they were yet to return, the council had also begun training their army and strategizing for the coming war. Killian and my brothers were part of the teams of alphas, helping the council, while I was helping Cora in recreating the spell we would need for Shota's bones when Zena, Valerie, and the witches returned. I went to the clothing rack and pulled out a pair of brown leather pants, and its matching leather vest to wear. I fastened my boots and tied my long brown hair in a ponytail, ignoring the painstaking ache against my skull. It had been constant the last few days, and the strange weakness I experienced was getting worse. Valerie had begun to figure out why my dreams had suddenly stopped before she went on this trip with the witches, but so far, there was no plausible reason. I left the castle and got on my horse, heading to the council's castle. I was there in no time, alighting from my horse. I handed the reins over to a warrior who took it away. From a distance away, I could hear the loud growls coming from the large training field where the warriors were training. I ambled to the castle, taking the hallways that led to Cora's spell room. On my way, I met with Jaskier. He was at the witch spell room. He and some witches had joined the council's coven. At the end of the hallway was Cora's spell room. I pulled it gently, using my magic, and found Cora at the end of the room. She was busy browsing through her grimoire. Cora was one of the elder witches in the council, and she was a weaver as well. Calmly, she lifted her head to the door as I walked in, and a small smile lit her face. "You are here." I let out a small smile, nodding as my eyes caught the pile of ingredients that were stationed on the table next to hers. "What's all these?" I asked, running my fingers through them. She closed her grimoire, pulling up from her seat. "I was working on a new spell, but that's aside." With a wave of her fingers, she bundled them into a bag, and tossed it aside. "Any word from Zena?" I queried, meeting Cora's deep ashen eyes as she shook her head. I sighed. "They haven't found Shota's remains yet." I asked again. Not yet. But don't worry, they will. The old council did everything in its power to hide Shota's remains. Even though the witch is dead, her remains still held dark magic. So, to ensure it doesn't wind up in the wrong hands, it was hidden, and everything about her or that darkness was erased from history. But they did ensure we had a way of finding it, she explained, as I settled into one of the chairs. I hope everything turns out well, I said, and Cora settled into the chair opposite mine, her deep gaze regarding me. Hope is all we have now, Sheila, she bit out carefully. And more than ever, I am more hopeful now that you are here with us, she added, and my brows crippled in confusion. Why do you say that? I couldn't stop myself from asking. The rise of the greatest evil, she inhaled, for so long we had feared the prophecy from coming through, thinking you were dead after what happened that night. But Amelie's visions never stopped, and we knew it was impossible to stop this darkness from coming through. We also knew we didn't stand a chance because we thought the white wolf was dead. But you are not, Sheila. I don't mean to scare you, but you were aware of the prophecy on the crystal stones, even as a child. No one knows what your role is in all of these, but you are not like the rest of us, you are powerful, Sheila, and the best chance we have in stopping this unnamed darkness and its vessel, and I know deep down we will win this. Listening to Cora's words, I could barely swallow the lump in my throat. I felt a knot in the deepest corners of my chest, tightening at every second, squeezing me, as if sucking every ounce of life and magic from me. Her words hit me deeply, and for the first time in my life, I felt as if a heavy weight was placed on my shoulders. I shut my eyes closed, hissing silently at the painstaking ache against my skull that wanted to consume me. Are you all right? Cora's alarmed voice called out to me, and I pulled my eyes open, nodding. She exhaled, holding a small smile. We should continue with the spell. Cora and I continued from where we last left off, weaving a new spell we would use to perform the ritual on Shota's bones. I was in her spell room for hours, and by the time we were done, it was almost dusk. I left her spell room, sauntering deeper to the left-wing side of the castle. I walked for a few minutes before stopping in front of a chamber. It was Amelie's. I was about to pull it open when a young witch stepped out from the chamber. She lowered her head upon seeing me. How's Amelie? I asked. I was told by Zariah before she went on her trip that Amelie had gotten worse. Now she barely speaks to anyone and instead, stares at her black crystal ball all day. Still the same. I'm afraid she may not be able to see you or even speak to you now, the witch said, and I thought deeply, before nodding. I understand. But I would still like to see her, the witch nodded, before opening the door for me and I stepped in. Amelie's chamber was dark, only the evening light that traveled into the chamber attempted to illuminate the chamber. She prefers the darkness, the witch said, and I nodded, before shutting the door behind me. I strode in and at a corner, near the window, I saw Amelie seated on a chair. As I moved further into the chamber, she didn't budge as much, her eyes were fixated on the black crystal ball in her hands, almost as if she was seeing something in them. I moved closer and stopped until I was next to her. She still didn't move. She looked strained and exhausted. The skin around her eyes was tired and had dark circles. This was the thing about her gift, it was like a parasite that fed on the person's magic. I crouched down next to her, and slowly my eyes fell on the black crystal ball, and for some reason, I just couldn't tear my eyes away from it. That's the thing about people like us. No one sees what we see. I shook in surprise, tearing my gaze away from the black crystal ball, and pulling my gaze to Amelie. Amelie, I called in shock, but her eyes remained on the ball, and if I wasn't sure I heard her voice, I would have thought I was hallucinating. I know, I replied to her words, settling on the cold floors. What do you see? And, if the darkness wins, finally, she pulled her gaze from the ball to me and a small smile slipped past her lips, as her eyes took me in. It won't, I muttered, unsure of my own words. I didn't know why I was suddenly feeling this way, but Amelie smiled again. I don't know what to do. My dreams stopped coming, and I feel so scared, like something bad is about to happen, something that will be out of my control. I forced it all out, and Amelie's gaze softened, but she didn't utter a word. Instead her eyes shifted back to the black crystal ball. You will have to make a choice soon, before it's too late, I furrowed my brows at her words. You must do what you must, she added in a drawl as if she was in a trance. What choice, Amelie? I asked sharply, but she didn't say anything. What must I do? I asked again, but nothing from her. Unsatisfied with what I just heard, I moved closer to her. Amelie, what? My words were cut off the instant I placed my hands on hers that was holding her crystal ball. And then I saw it. The deaths, chaos, and blood around. I gasped, and her vision began to move fast, making it difficult to understand what I was seeing. A war. Blood. Deaths. My eyes widened in shock, suddenly understanding what I was seeing. A blood ritual. I couldn't breathe. I could hear the echo of a female cackling, and in fast motion, I began to see the corpses of everyone I loved. My brothers. The pack and Killian. All dead. I screamed, jerking away from Amelie and breaking out from whatever that was. I stumbled back on my boots, and Amelie's gaze was still fixed on the ball. I bolted out of her chamber, hurrying out of the castle. I couldn't stop the hot tears that raced from my eyes, and the fast beating of my heart. I kept moving without quickly, until I crashed hard into something, and I felt familiar tingles envelop my body. Killian. What happened, Sheila? Why are you crying? I heard Killian yell, and more tears rushed free as everything I saw played once again in my mind. Who made you cry? I heard Leonardo's thundering voice from behind as Killian embraced me. The warmth and tingles made it easier to control my emotions. It's nothing, I said. I guess it's just pressure from the coming war, I lied. I didn't know what else to say. Killian and Leonardo didn't say a word, even though I knew they didn't believe a word I said. I'm done here, I said. Already? I'll go back with you, Killian started, but I shook my head. You don't have to, Killian. I know you still have a lot to do here. I'll be fine, I rushed, fighting the murdering ache in my skull. I kissed Killian, and gave Leo a quick hug, before scurrying off to my horse and leaving the council's grounds. I was riding through the woods when the painstaking ache against my skull intensified. I groaned, tightening my hold on the reins when I felt an overpowering tug within the depths of my soul. It came again, and this time, the excruciating cold pushed me off my horse into the ground. The next thing I felt was an unwelcoming coldness and I lost consciousness. Killian's point of view, I handed my horse over to the warriors. It was already dark when I returned from the council's castle. I moved in a hurry. I badly wanted to see Sheila. I had been feeling restless since I saw her in tears back at the council's castle. I had been trying to mind-link her, but it wasn't connecting. Only the goddess knew how worried I was, and I still was. Even after I had mind-linked Ria, asked about Sheila, and was informed she was back in the castle, I just couldn't remain at peace. I hurried through the hallways, heading to my chamber. Hastily, I pushed the door open, and the first thing my eyes fell on was the bed, where Sheila was curled on, sleeping. I exhaled, feeling a certain calmness and relief wash over me. Slowly, I locked the door, moving to the bed where she was. She had changed from the clothes she wore earlier to one of her dresses. Ria had told me she had been sleeping since she returned from the council's castle. I leaned on the bed, placing a kiss on her forehead, rubbing my hand up and down her arm. She stirred only a little, and I pulled the covers over her body. She was a little cold. And that worried me. Ever since we returned from Oasis, she has constantly been cold, which is very strange for wolves. I wanted the pack's physician, Dr. Maggie, to take a look at her, but Sheila refused. I kissed her again, moving to the clothing rack, and taking off my leather jacket when I heard her turn on the bed. She just woke up. I smiled, moving to the bed, as Sheila pulled up from bed, sweeping back her hair from her face. "Sorry I woke you up." I leaned closer, kissing her, but she pulled away and I could hear the blasting of her heartbeat. It alarmed me. "What's wrong?" "Killian," she held onto my hand tightly, as her confused, wide eyes scanned the chamber, before falling on her dress. "What happened?" she uttered, and I moved closer to her. "I don't understand, Sheila." I was getting worried by the second from her pounding heartbeat that sounded as though her heart was about to explode any second from now. "Sheila, relax," I said, hearing a loud crack on the tall mirror hanging on the wall. Her magic was beginning to react to her emotions. But she held onto my clothes. "How on earth did I get here?" she asked, wide-eyed. And my eyebrows creased into similar confusion. "Sheila," I began, but her sharp words silenced me. "I don't know how I got here, Killian. I can't remember." She was panicking and it was scaring me. This was the second time I was seeing her this way today. I held her in my arms, calming her. "Sheila, breathe and explain what you are saying. I don't understand." I didn't let go of her. She was silent for a while as if trying to remember something. "The last thing I remember was leaving the council, and then, I felt this painful ache and that's it. I lost consciousness. I don't remember coming to the pack." "What?" I was completely confused, and more worried than ever as fresh tears rolled down from her eyes. "But Ria saw you coming in," I said, worsening the situation. "If so, why can't I remember?" she said, as I wiped her tear-stained cheeks. "It hurts me to see you like this. Don't think too much about it. Maybe "You came in too tired and went straight to bed," I said, and her blue eyes held my gaze, doubting that was the case. "Kill," she started but stopped when our gaze became foggy and distant. Morgan and Alan were mind-linking both of us. "What is it?" I asked, through the mind link. "Something's wrong, brother. You both need to see this," Morgan said, and my eyes locked with Sheila's. "Where are you?" Sheila asked through the mind link, and Alan informed us they were in the woods. "We are on our way." We disconnected from the mind link, and Sheila was about to pull up from the bed, but I held her back. "Why don't you stay? I'll check it out," I said, knowing full well she would disagree. And she did. "No. I'm coming with," she sounded, leaving no room for argument. We left the chamber, moving hurried out of the castle, stepping into the darkness. We headed into the woods with the moon lighting our paths to where they were. Morgan, Alan, Xavier, Lorenzo, and a few warriors were there already. "What happened?" I asked, my eyes scanning everyone's face, falling on Lorenzo, who was crouched on the ground, behind the tree. "We found this as we were patrolling the woods." Xavier pulled his burning torch to the tall tree next to him. I followed the trail of the burning torch, and my amber eyes fell on a giant symbol etched deep into the tree. I moved closer. "What is this?" I asked, looking at the symbol before my eyes turned to my brother. "I have no idea," Morgan responded, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. No one had to say anything, this was a witch stewing. Lorenzo pulled up from the ground as he was in